Welcome to the God-Centered Recovery Podcast, brought to you by Narrowgate Ministries. This podcast is dedicated to giving you a God-centered approach to recovery and to life. Follow along. Let's get started. All right. Welcome to the first official episode of the God-Centered Recovery Podcast. This is a podcast dedicated to recovery, centered around your faith in God. So I'm going to get started with this, and I'm going to talk about the why behind this podcast, because I believe if you understand the reason, the purpose, and intention, and where this passion comes from, you will understand what this podcast is all about. So I'm going to take you back to a story. It's about 11 p.m. one night. I'm around, I would say, about 23 years old. I could have been almost 24, but around 23 years old. And me and my wife fell asleep in the living room, which we sometimes do when we were watching TV. And so we fell asleep in the living room, in about, I would say, between 11 o'clock and midnight, there was banging on the windows of the house. And apparently I didn't hear very quickly, so they started to bang louder. And so by the time I did awake, the banging was so loud that I jumped up and I thought that somebody was trying to break into the house. And so the sound was really loud, but in the midst of the sound, I heard my name, and it sounded like a familiar voice. And so I went to the door and I opened the door, and it was my godparents. And as they walked into the house, they looked like they seen a ghost. Like their face was really somber and really serious. And they said, "We've been trying to get a hold of you, for hours, and this, that, and the other thing." Well, when I go to sleep at night, I used to turn my phone off because I didn't like to be bothered. When I went to sleep, I just wanted to be asleep. So I turned my phone off so nobody could get a hold of me. And so they're frantically saying, we've been trying to get a hold of you for hours. And so they told me to sit down in this real serious, somber sort of attitude. And, I began to think, like, what's going on? Like, this is like really freaky, beating on my house, acting all serious. I knew something was definitely wrong. So then they began to tell me to sit down. And so my wife and I sat down on the couch. And then they began to tell me that my father was dead, and that he died of a heroin overdose. And this extreme pain began to happen inside of my chest, where it was hard to breathe. And I'll try to explain this anxiety that came over me, but it was just this tunnel vision sort of anxiety that it feels like the whole world is just kind of crashing down on you, and you feel this pressure and this weight all centered around your chest and stuff. Anybody who has experienced anxiety really knows what that feels like. But I couldn't believe it, what I was hearing, that my father had died of a heroin overdose. I remember as a teenager, him doing heroin a lot, and you could tell, of course, because living in the environment, and when somebody's high and their head just bobs down and their mouth is wide open and they're just high as a kite and not even present. But I remember a couple different times. One of the times stand out in my mind of my dad overdosing, and me running to turn on the cold water in the shower. Now, this is amazing, and if you haven't grew up in this environment, you don't understand this, but we all knew what to do when Dad overdosed. We all knew what to do. And so here we are running to the shower, turning on the cold water, and him crawling on his hands and knees, as slow as can be, and you just like help pull him into the shower. And I remember that a couple different times. And then, of course, the paramedics and stuff coming and stuff like that. But we all knew what to do when Dad OD'd. And there was always somebody there for him that would basically come rescue him, from the state and condition. But this night, he had nobody to rescue him. And he was all alone when he did this. And so when he OD'd this time, there was nobody there to help him. And so I spent the night over at my godparents' house, and then, spent a couple days in the fog. And as I began thinking about it, I said, you know what, maybe my mother would like to come to my father's funeral. I know that she always loved him and never got over him. So I'm thinking, maybe she would want to know about this situation. Me and my mother were pretty close most of my life. I was taken away when I was 10 years old, and because of drugs and addiction and prostitution and all of those things. But we were pretty close all the way up to, I would say, about 20 or 21. Somewhere in there, we just kind of lost contact somehow, and I didn't really know where she was. And so I thought for sure, I would find her. It'd only been a couple of years of me not knowing where she was. And I contacted her sister, and I was explaining to her what had happened with my father, and that he died of a heroin overdose, and that we were going to have his memorial service in Fairmount Park in Riverside, California, and that I'm sure that she would love to be there. So then she begins to tell me that my mother has died, and that she died about a year ago, a year before this, and that she died due to complications from cancer that was brought about from heroin and methamphetamines and stuff like that. And so here I am in this situation, experiencing, the loss of my father due to heroin overdose, and then the loss of my mother due to addiction. And so my life, of course, began to spiral into this trauma and into this funk, where, I was a pastor at the time. I was asked to step down from that due to just not being able to function in a normal fashion. And I spent a lot of nights in depression and alcohol and things like that. And so I say all this to say this, is that there is a lot of pain and a lot of trauma that comes with addiction. And a lot of time this trauma and this pain, it spreads from generation to generation. And so my goal in this podcast is to put a stop to it. And knowing, all the pain that I went through and everything that happened to me, I don't want someone else to experience the same pain. And here's the reality, that people that have recovered, people that have got their lives on the straight and narrow and are living the abundant life, they have the answers. They have what is needed to make the necessary changes for life. And so that being said, that's why I'm starting this podcast, to share with you the stories and the inspiration and the people that have lived through addiction, that are overcoming it, and they are now living the abundant life. So the goal in this podcast is to have no other young man out there have to experience that their father just OD'd. They don't have to experience their mother rotting away from the cancer and from the drugs that have consumed their lives. And so this is the reason for this podcast. I encourage you to listen. I encourage you to join us every single week as we bring to you these amazing stories of men and women who have overcome addiction and who are now living the abundant life. I'll see you soon. Peace.